If you're watching, you're welcome to today's live broadcast with me, Ayo, and Sade. All right, she's going to be on in a moment. Yeah. Oh,
Hello, that's much better. I was sideways earlier.
hey, Sade.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, very loud.
Nice.
And
All
you can hear me
right.
also.
Yes, I think we're good.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So, how was your day?
So far so good. My phone wasn't cooperating earlier, so.
Yeah, yeah. Things happen. Right. So, what are we doing today?
We're talking about the impact of sexual abuse. And I think one of the things I'd like to say is like, why is this important, I guess?
Exactly.
Let me ask you that. Let's, start with that. Like, why is it important for the general populace to understand the impact of sexual abuse? Like, why does this it sounds like it doesn't matter, and we're wading in after the big controversy and all of the things that have been in the news. Why does it matter that an educational discussion has to follow?
I think because we see in the questions that follow disclosure and in the attitudes of some, actually, I would say too many responders. You begin to see. I think we have a problem with empathy. To hit the nail on the head. It's unbelievable that there should be such a large number of people who just don't get it, and who say things like, the commonest reaction, which tells you that we have a problem, is people saying, "Why is she just talking now? Why did it
Right.
take her so long? What was she doing all of that time?" Then you go to all the more cliched responses like, "I'm sure she enjoyed it anyway. What was she
Right.
wearing? Why was she there at the time?" Eh? And so many other things. So people say things, and from the way people respond, you can tell that we need to work on how we approach victims. You know, we should not trivialize that. We should not make the injury worse. And we should all be in a position one way or another to help other people. So I think that's why we're having this discussion.
Right. I agree. I really like the fact that I use the word injury. I think if people can see that sexual abuse, sexual molestation at any stage is an injury to the victim or survivor,
Mr. Ahmed here.
it's an
Mr. Ahmed here.
injury. What do you say? Hi.
Hi, Mr.
um,
Ahmed.
it's an injury. Like, literally, it's a wound that never healed unless the
Yeah,
person has actually gotten help. And if you can begin to see that incident, whether it's a single incident or a chronic incident, which has its own level of impact that's different, if you see it as an injury that needs to be treated, so even though there are no scars on the outside, and most sexual abuse victims will appear to be functional and they look just like everybody else. I mean, think about it. When you look at the numbers in the United States here is like 1 in 4 women before the
right.
age of 18 will be molested. In
Yeah,
Nigeria, we know the numbers are way higher. So
yeah.
when I step out, sometimes I like to play this game. I like to play this game when I go to church. I'll count 4 women: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But you can go a whole year and never hear it mentioned from the
Yeah,
pulpit that
yeah,
these people have been injured at some point, and that injury has never been healed. It's never been cared for. No one has done anything about it. So I love the word injury that you use, because that really brings the impact home. It's like
yeah,
someone got a boil and it just continued festering over 30 years.
yeah.
So literally, for someone who discloses after 30 years, they've had a boil festering for 30 years. And so when they now, quote unquote, burst it open, it's perfectly legitimate for them to burst it open after 30 years. It's been
Right.
festering, simmering, hurting. They've been in pain. They've been suffering from the impact of it. There are things they haven't been able to do over time because of it. So yeah,
Right.
30 years of something festering is not too late. In fact, they have a lot of courage and they should be encouraged to come forth because that's the beginning of the healing.
Yeah. I picked a few points from what you were saying. Trying to see if I can find the numbers here because I like numbers. Okay.
Now, these are the numbers for Nigeria or Africa?
I have numbers for Nigeria and numbers for global. In terms of how long people wait, I haven't found it. When I find them, I'll come back. But I wanted to point out two things from what you were saying. One, I think we're talking because we also want to address the illusion of seeing a person who looks complete on the outside. A person who looks like their life is working out. They have a job, they have a home, they have kids. So what is their problem? Look at the wife of Timi Dakolo, for instance. What's her problem? Her husband is a rich guy. He's famous. She has a great job. So, yeah. So we're going to discuss that, but however we discuss it, I want us to show that the act of disclosure itself is a sign of growth.
Right.
If I have everything going on in my life, domestically, financially, when I get to a point where I realize that in spite of all these physical blessings, I really do need to address an emotional need, it means I have grown as a human being. And I'm on the, if you like, on the verge between material success and complete success as a human being, both inside and outside. People should reward that, recognize that as a positive step.
Yep. Emotional awareness. It's like the next step in our evolution is emotional intelligence. Realizing that our emotions are important and that our emotions exist and that they drive everything that we do. So most people who are coming forward are realizing, oh my God, this thing that happened to me, that happened to me is driving these negative emotions. I need to do something about it to heal and to change those emotions around. All right, go ahead. Numbers.
Numbers. And I'm going to prove this as we go along, that there's a difference between a person who has material success and keeps emotional abuse hidden and one who faces the emotional abuse. And one example I like to give is that right now you could be a manager in the company where you work, but if only you would deal with the emotional blocks in your psyche, you could end up being the CEO of that company. The difference between being a manager and a CEO is psyches and patterns of behavior and choices we make in life, which are rooted in trauma that is unhealed.
I have a lot to say about that, but I'll let you give the numbers first.
Let's hold that. So just two numbers. One, according to data on sexual abuse, when it comes to children, only 1 out of children who have been abused ever speak about it.
1 out of how many?
Out of 3 children. So for every 1 child who speaks out, there are 2 who are not going to tell you that they have been abused. Twice as many, that's what it means. Then the average age of disclosure for victims of sexual abuse in childhood is 36 years old.
Yep, sounds right.
Add that to the fact that I already know that most child sexual abuse happens between the ages of 3 and 8 years. If someone is abused at the age of 5 or 6 years old and talks about it when they're 36, it's standard practice. And one of the reasons why is because biologically as human beings, the immediate response to abuse or any other kind of threat or trauma is self-preservation.
Right.
They're alive. So I shut down immediately. I put out all my defense mechanisms and I buried the memory of the incident. It happened to me between the conversation we had many months ago. How until you spoke to me last year, I had spent a quarter of a century not knowing that something like that happened to me. So in the moment that it happens, the first thing you do is to suppress it or repress it.
Right.
And get on. It takes some other things that happen in your future to get to the point where you say, wait a minute, what was that thing that happened some decades ago? So this is normal human behavior, and there are reasons why we behave like that.
Right, and children are not equipped to handle that incident.
Yeah.
It's like children are just, so you're asking a child to rationally interpret the act of sexual abuse in that moment. And quote unquote, do the right thing, which is go and tell your mommy, go and tell your daddy, go and tell the police. Really? A 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, they don't even know what happened. They just, all they know is that there was something that happened that, you know, imprinted them emotionally. The neurons fired in their brain, basically you can assume that a child that goes through that is in shock.
Absolutely.
Any response that comes out of it is a shock, a shock response. And the first thing, like you said, what the body does when there's shock is to shut down, to preserve its, its processes, to keep the heart beating, to keep the brain going, to keep blood flowing. It's going to shut down. So the child will shut down emotionally. And then adult victims of rape will go through something similar, because you're talking, there's violence involved.
Absolutely.
They're going to shut down as well.
And there's shame and stigma.
And that, in fact, that's a whole other thing. But even just the physical, the biological response is shock.
Yeah.
And there are dissociative responses where some people would literally shut off their brain so that they're not experiencing everything that's happening in that moment.
Yeah.
And I know one of the impacts that can happen in a psychological way is, especially when it happens young. So say a child has been going along the first 4 years of their life, literally generally safe, things are generally good, and then they experience that trauma. The shutting down or that freeze response can become a coping mechanism that they use in other situations where that reminds them of that feels dangerous. And this comes back to what you said about being a manager versus being the CEO. See, when you want to go for a job interview, right, your body, your mind has that, something big is happening right now. When you want to start a business, your body and your mind have that, that taking a risk. Well, guess what that's going to trigger? When you have that feeling of that something bad might happen, or you're taking a risk, if you've had an emotional imprint of trauma, you can carry that response into situations that it doesn't apply to.
Yeah, like your work.
So then you want to go for an interview, or you want to confront something at work, you want to ask for a promotion, you want to ask for more money. Your brain doesn't know that this situation is different, because your brain is just an organ. Your brain says, okay, well, when we were young and something bad happened, we shut down and we were safe. So now you're getting ready to go ask for a promotion. You need to shut down so we can stay safe.
So you keep aiming lower in life.
Yes,
you
to stay safe.
Not being your best self. While other people outperform you and get promoted to CEO and you stay manager. And you don't see the link between where you're coming from and where you are right now.
Yeah, this is literally what I do as a life coach.
Yeah, okay.
All the time. For people who've experienced marital abuse, sexual abuse, dysfunctional families, childhood neglect and abandonment, they're all fear responses. And then we carry those fear responses from those situations into situations where something good could actually happen. And when you're not emotionally aware, when you're not cognizant of how the brain works, and then overriding those responses through coaching and learning new skills, you can literally hold yourself back throughout life.
So if these things, like you said, are leading to patterns that have nothing to do with abuse, including patterns in our workplaces, wouldn't that be the reason why we have to do some work to break the pattern of trauma?
Exactly. And this is why healing, there has to be recovery, there has to be healing, the abuse has to be addressed. Now, it doesn't all have to be addressed the same way. Not everyone's going to go to a newspaper and break the news. But it needs to be addressed, even if it's only addressed by the individual and another safe person, or addressed by the individual doing the work of self-development by themselves with the help of a coach or in a support group. There's so many different avenues for that support. Yeah. But it needs to be addressed. You can't just sweep it under the rug. Right.
So Sade, you have mentioned the things that happen at work with your promotion and career. Splendor has a comment. Splendor, I'm reading you. These are social and economic consequences of abuse. Sade, do you know if there are common impacts of abuse that have to do with your health, for instance?
Yes. Okay. So, and I know I'm not going to put this in the same medical terms, but from research, what I've seen just, reading research papers is that things that can come up that can affect your health is disturbed eating patterns. Frequently, sexual abuse, sexual harassment can cause, in layman's terms, overeating, emotional overeating. Like literally the brain, and this is the way we put it in coaching terms, the brain tries to protect the individual by putting on a layer. Like when you look at your body and you feel like your body is attracting danger to you, You're going to try to fix it subconsciously. So many people will turn to overeating and creating that layer of protection around them.
Like something pleasing here, away from
There's
all of that.
yes, if I
Yeah.
don't look beautiful, then maybe he'll stop coming into my bedroom at night.
Hey, Fatih. Fatih's saying hi.
Hey Fatty, sorry, I can't see the comments just yet.
Yeah.
And food also it can be comforting. So
Oh, yeah.
literally the child can go and start using food to comfort themselves from the trauma, to deal with the emotions, especially with the
Hey,
chronic
Gail.
trauma that goes on, chronic abuse that goes on for years. There's so many stories of people where they were abused. Joyce Meyer is one. She's actually one of the more popular stories where her own father, and there's an impact that comes from it being someone you know versus someone you don't know, which we can get to that as
Right.
well. But in her
What?
case,
Yeah.
that abuse went on, I think, about a decade of her
Hey,
life.
Mide. Yeah.
So there's that
And it's good you
impact where,
mentioned,
yeah,
good you
great.
mentioned Joyce Meyer. People know Joyce Meyer. She looks good on the outside. So I'm sure some people are going to be like, if I'm that powerful and influential, what do I need to do with the coming out or disclosure? Well, Joyce Meyer wasn't okay until she did her disclosure. So I think we should also put
Right,
ourselves in that
right.
in those shoes.
One of the reasons disclosure is important is that it's the beginning of taking away the shame. So especially if the person was a child or an adolescent when they experienced the abuse,
Yeah.
and if the abuse was perpetrated by someone that they know, a trusted person,
Yeah.
the child really has a really hard time. And this is like, it's like a cognitive dissonance. It's like, this person I know and love, and they
Hey,
love me,
Dio. Yeah.
right? This person knows me and loves me. I love this person. This person harmed me. They're two separate thoughts that the brain can't
Yeah.
really handle them really well. So
Yeah.
most of the time, what an abuse victim will do is choose one or the other. If they're a child, they will usually choose the thought that, oh, this person loves me. This person is a good person. And so then if I was harmed, it must have been because I did something wrong. It must be
Okay.
because there's something wrong with me. It's like when when your parents spank you or when they put you in timeout or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
you don't think of it as a child, you don't think of it as, oh, they did something wrong to me. In fact, they tell you, I'm
You did
doing
it.
this because you did this, XYZ. And hopefully, there's some logic between what they're doing. Otherwise, then it's abuse. In that
Yeah.
scenario, and many perpetrators will tell the child that, look what you made me do, or you made me do this, or if you tell, I'm going to do this. And so the child then turns the negative thinking on themselves. There must
All
be
right.
something wrong with me. And that becomes a record that plays in the mind over and over. I must be doing something wrong. When bad things happen to me, it must be my fault. And so when that imprint is made on the brain, you take that into the rest of your life, which causes like depression. So that in depression and anxiety, because you don't know what you do that's wrong. It's like, well, I was just
Yeah.
playing that day. I was just in my underwear as a 4-year-old, and this
Yeah.
bad thing happened to me. I must basically, I could do something wrong at any time and I wouldn't even know what
Hey,
it
Balale.
is.
Yeah.
And that causes so much anxiety and depression. I'm talking chronic depression now. So
Yeah.
literally you have people walking around with this chronic feeling of something being wrong with their lives, but they don't even know what it is.
Yeah. Is depression the same as being sad? Sad feelings?
No,
No, it's not.
no, it's
All
not.
right.
No,
Because
depression is not the same thing as sad feelings. Depression is now. Depression is more of a, see, you're the doctor now, you can't be putting these questions on me now. I'm
well,
a
I know
coach,
you
and
know.
I'm not a therapist, I'm a life coach, which is a difference.
But
A therapist is,
how do you deal with people who say, oh, you're not feeling happy, just do something exciting, go to a party or go to church
it's the same people who
or
will
dance
tell it,
around,
those are the same people that tell a rape victim to get over it.
get
It's
over
the
it.
same thing. It's a lack of empathy. It's a lack of, it's a lack of education on the topic, which, really, if you don't understand a topic, the best thing you can do is not say anything about it. If you don't understand depression, don't
Awesome.
talk about it. If you don't
Yeah.
understand sexual abuse and the impact, just don't say anything. Like, at least let the person
Uh-huh.
take their
Yeah.
burden somewhere else instead of adding
Yeah.
to their burden.
Yeah.
Depression is literally it's having a negative self-concept, combined with feelings of helplessness. Like you're experiencing something and you have, or you feel like you have no control over it. There's nothing you can do to change it. When you've had that kind of shame imprinted on you as a young person, you're not equipped to deal with it. You're not equipped to understand it. That causes depression, because it's like, my life is just sucks and I don't know why. And I just keep feeling this ongoing sucky feeling.
Yeah, Gail is trying to educate us here. And thanks, Gail. She reminds us that if it's just sadness, then that's a feeling you can shake off. But depression stays inside. So I think that's what Gail is also telling us, is that depression is not an emotion. It's a condition of being. It's a medical illness. And the cure is medical.
Cure is medical. I look at depression as at least depression brought on by, things like trauma. Versus a chemical imbalance. So like you have what's brought on by trauma, you have what's brought on by a chemical imbalance. I look at it as grief. It's just grief that's been bottled up for years. So when someone loses a loved one, it takes them a year, several years, depending on who they lost, to reclaim life or re-enter life. I have friends who've lost children. It takes years and they never really truly, quote unquote, get over it. And they shouldn't. There's no reason to. The depression that comes from trauma is the same way. That child and that person, that woman, is grieving a loss of innocence, is grieving a loss of identity, is grieving a loss of a dream, is grieving a loss of a piece of themselves that they can't get back, and that they don't even know that they lost. It's like you don't even, as a child, you don't even know what you lost. But whatever it is impacting you on an ongoing basis. It's a very loaded, I don't even feel like any one person can say, okay, I have a handle on this. But the goal really is to say, hey, if you've been through this, there's nothing wrong with you. There's a reason why you feel the way you feel. There's a reason why you have that anger bottled up. There's a reason why you have that grief bottled up. There's a reason why you feel fearful, why you have panic attacks, why you're anxious. There's a reason why you have trouble with your intimate relationships. There's a reason why you have sexual issues in your marriage. It may not be that there's something wrong with you. It may just be that something happened to you that you haven't dealt with.
Yeah. And what you said also reminded me of our environment and how we should be we should be careful not to judge people for how much they tell, because in some of our cultures, we do not really have a culture of allowing people to express their deepest or truest selves or to speak about complex topics.
Right.
And I say that this has a lot to do with raising children in childhood. If you are listening to this, ask yourself, how many candid conversations have I had with my parents as a child? What kind of things did you say to your parents when you were growing up? In some of my research, I found that the conventional conversations between many children in my culture and their parents doesn't go beyond things to do with your food and your homework. Yeah. That's why have you eaten? It's a loaded statement that means more than just have you.
It means I love you.
I love you. So we have you eaten? And then if child has eaten, then what else does the child want? Or have you done your homework? That one has to do with your responsibility and your integrity. If you don't do your homework, you're evil. If you do it, you're okay.
What about those of us that didn't even ask if we had eaten? Where should we be left then?
Exactly. So this is a limited spectrum of conversations to have, and you don't expect that child to grow up coming to the parents with complex topics. So the day that anything sexual happening to other people or to his or herself, they're not going to come to parents that they never said anything beyond food and homework and say that they don't talk about sex. You know that there's some places where if you say the word sex, you really get reprimanded, you get stigmatized. Right. So those things need to change. Childhood needs to be developed differently so that kids can talk freely and openly while they're still very young. On the post I made some weeks ago about what happened to Busola, a lady commented and she said, can I share your post with my kids? I'm not sure. They are teenagers. I don't know if they can read it. And I told this one, I said, most kids have their own general idea about sex by the time they are 6 years old. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Most sexual abuse happens between the ages of 3 and 8. If your children are teenagers now, and you're still asking whether they can read my post, and I'm like, you might be a bit too late. Please let them not only read it, have that conversation with them. Then she said, okay, you know, can you advise me? I want to go to the bookshop and buy some books. so that they can read it. We're talking about teenage kids. I'm like, don't buy any books. Kids can read by themselves. They have Google. They can do internet.
And they already are.
So instead of buying books, sit face to face. I know you're ashamed to say, because many of us in our generation were not even raised to have sexual conversations. But you have to overcome that so we don't pass it on to one more generation. Talk to your children face to face. And when you're talking, don't use euphemisms. So, those private parts have names. Don't use very funny names because, don't create, the thing I'm trying to break here is the association between shame and sexuality. That needs to be broken from childhood so that in future, you can have healthy conversations around sex. And when abuse happens also, they can say to you on time why you can still redirect the course of their lives before things get really damaged.
All right, so Fatih has a question. She said, any tips for abused children and adults who overcompensate after revealing their trauma? And I guess my question is, Fatih, do you mean they overcompensate by acting out or by talking about it? Because those are two different things. And I'll try to address maybe the part about talking about it from my experience from going through a divorce. So this story is really funny. But when, so when I separated from my ex-husband, I talked about it a lot with my inner circle, the people who were around me, who were supporting me. I had a lot to say. First of all, because it had been 17 years of not talking about it. Literally been 17 years of crazy. Hadn't really said much about it. So when it came time to start talking about it, it was like I was repeating a lot of things. I was saying things over and over. Okay, 1 second. All right.
See what you see what Fatih explained just now?
No, I didn't see her. I didn't see her.
They're explaining overcompensation as being aggressive and standoffish with outsiders.
Oh, yes, totally. Yeah. Oh, my goodness, totally. Yeah, and actually, I went through that as well. I wasn't even dealing with, sexual abuse. This was just, an emotionally abusive marriage, going through a divorce, all that drama. And so I talked about it a lot. So, like, I had a small group of women around me who were, like, very supportive, right? And I just kept going over. In fact, there was one of my friends, she had, during the first 2 years after my divorce, she had 2 children who were both preemies. And she had the first child. She was still my support. I would talk to her. Every day I would call her for 30 minutes, talk about, he did this, he did that, blah, 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 blah. It was after she had her second child and he was in the NICU. And I was like, Sade, maybe it's time you stop, like, talking about it all the time, that kind of a thing. So there's that where you need to tell your story, which is why you really need safe people around you, safe people who are like, look, we understand, we love you unconditionally, and we're really willing to walk with you through whatever you're going through. So that's one, overcompensating by telling your story until you heal. It's part of the healing process. Now, overcompensating by losing trust. Actually, the inability to trust is an impact of sexual abuse. Because the people you trusted either hurt you, were the ones that hurt you, or they added to the hurt by shaming you or by punishing you for revealing the hurt. Like, these things sound small, but they're not small. And the way that impacted me, I can use the example of my divorce as well, was because when I revealed what was going on in my marriage to my church, the response was completely inappropriate. I mean, it was like, I don't want to go into details. So I didn't go to church for a while. I went to a couple of us, and I was just like, I became one of these Christians who was like, these church people, they don't get it. And honestly, a lot of church people don't get it. They really, really don't. And it took a long time for me to say, you know what? But look at it. It took a long time for me to walk myself back and say, but there are some people who get it. On a global front, on a general front, the church doesn't get it. But within the church, there are some people that get it. And I realized that some of the people who are my closest support members were church members. So yes, there is that, because you don't know who to trust. What happens is when you realize that you've been violated, which sometimes people don't realize that until they're disclosing, when it finally hits home that, oh my God, what this person did was not just an innocent thing. It wasn't just something I can get over. They literally stole parts of my life from me by abusing me as a child. When it hits home, you're angry. There's a lot of anger. And it's not, I wouldn't even call it overcompensation. I think that's the appropriate response.
In that moment, yeah?
Yeah, Yeah, it's to be like,
They,
what just
yeah,
happened here? And all of you defended this person, and all of you were here.
yeah,
Oh my God, heck no. I think that's okay. And
yeah.
I think it's okay to shut some people out. If you're not sure, I revamped my entire friend list. The people that had access to me changed. The people that I talked to changed. Some people just wanted to hear the tea or spill the tea, or wanted me to spill the tea of what was going on in my life. They just wanted me to,
Mm-hmm.
they just wanted to keep tabs on me.
Mm.
I vetted the people who had access to me, and who I told what was going on in my life based on my responses, and in a sense
Yeah.
what I realized was what a safe person looked like.
Yeah,
So
all
yeah.
this you say is growth, and that's if it's a future we have to put on the map for all of us. I just want to say quickly about churches, and then the same thing about families. That these are our close social networks, churches and families, and I think they both need to do some work on prioritizing victims above reputation. A
Yes.
challenge that we have in churches or in religious circles generally, not just churches and families, is that reputation is more precious than healing and than the well-being of the victim. And that's the how you call that, the scale of values or something. That needs to change. We need to put victims forward.
Right.
Reputations can be damaged and healed realistically, but human beings should be more important than all of that face saving and name saving that happens in families and churches.
Right. So I wanted to kind of go down the list of impacts. This
Great.
is
Yeah.
from this is from a research paper by Maltz with a Z, titled "The Long-Term Effects of Childhood Sexual Abuse."
Right.
And they did a really good. They have a really good paper. It's actually available. It's available online. In If you go to academia.edu, it's available on there. But anyway, I'm just going to run through it. I'm not going to expound because I know I can. If I jump on one of them, I'll just keep talking. But all right, so childhood sexual abuse has been correlated with higher levels of depression, guilt, shame, self-blame, eating disorders, somatic concerns, and by somatic concerns they mean like just physical symptoms, anxiety, dissociative patterns, repression, denial, sexual problems, and relationship problems. So survivors may have difficulty in externalizing the abuse. They may have difficulty blaming the perpetrator, and so they immediately turn it on themselves and think negatively about themselves. They tend to have, over time, with negative self-thoughts, they tend to grow feelings of worthlessness and possible social anxiety because they believe they have nothing to offer other people. They do report higher levels of depression. A percentage of them will report suicidal ideation, having disturbed sleeping patterns, and having disturbed eating patterns. When the sexual abuse is done by an esteemed, trusted adult, it may be hard for the children to view the perpetrator in a negative light, thus leaving them incapable of seeing what happened as not their fault. Survivors tend to display more self-destructive behaviors and experience more suicidal ideation than those who have not been abused. That's by Brown and Finkelhor, 1986. Ratican, 1992, describes the symptoms of sexual abuse survivors' body image problems to be related to feeling dirty or ugly, dissatisfaction with their body or their appearance, having eating disorders, and obesity. Some of the somatic, so physical conditions that can result from this somatic concerns. Women survivors reported significantly more medical concerns than people who had not experienced sexual abuse. And the most frequent medical complaint was pelvic pain. And somatization just means that it's a psychological wound, but then it gets absorbed into the body and manifests as physical pain, or a physical symptom. Childhood sexual abuse can be frightening and cause stress long after the experience or the experiences have ceased. Many times survivors experience chronic anxiety, tension, anxiety attacks, and phobias. A study compared the post-traumatic stress symptoms in Vietnam veterans and adult survivors of sexual abuse. And the study revealed that child sexual abuse is traumatizing and can result in symptoms comparable to symptoms from war-related trauma. Then it goes on to just talk about dissociation, amnesia, loss of childhood memory. So if a person might find themselves losing like large chunks of their childhood, you just don't remember what happened when you were 6 years old. You should know you have one memory of the entire time you were 6 years old, or their childhood memories start at a later date than is typical for people. There's a relationship between a person's ability to adjust to an intimate relationship and the level of severity of childhood abuse. The study revealed that as the severity of abuse increases, the inability to adjust to intimate relationships also increases. In terms of trust issues, sexual abuse is often, if sexual abuse is initiated by someone the child trusts and loves, which is majority of the time, it breaks trust and may result in the child believing that people they love will hurt them. There is also a significant relationship between women who were sexually abused in childhood and those same women being victimized in adulthood. Then the sexual difficulties, avoiding, fearing, lacking interest in sex, approaching sex as an obligation, negative feelings aroused with touch, feeling emotionally distant or not present during sex. I mean, it just goes on. So I don't want to just read the entire paper to you, but that's the bulk of what was in there. Like there's so many, and the impact is different depending on the person.
Yeah.
How the symptoms one person will have will be different from another person, depending on how frequent, who did it, what happened, all of that stuff. But these are some of the things you can expect a person to be carrying with them as they go on.
Yeah, great that you've gone into the some of the medical consequences. We're going to come back to that in a moment. But I want to respond to two things Fatih is saying, because these are practical situations. One, she's saying that she's trying to disrupt the pattern where abused people find it hard to make the transition from being overcompensating and avoiding intimacy, like you just said. And then so that means that they form a pattern of choosing wrong partners. None of them cannot form successful relationships. Yeah. It's either your marriage is breaking, or you've been through your 5th or 6th or 7th boyfriend, girlfriend, and you're not getting anywhere. It's just not working for you because you're not able to make quality choices in relationships.
Right.
So
it's true.
People who have been abused and who have kept it inside need to make the transition from avoidance and lack of emotional intimacy and being unable to sustain relationships into beginning to make healthy choices. Choose the person that is good for you. Those people that are good for you will keep passing by and you keep deflecting them because there's something you're afraid of. So Fatih raised that. And Fatih also raises the fact that articulating this for kids who are growing up is hard. And Fatih, I completely agree with you. Articulating is hard. Sade said something earlier, and it's fundamental to disclosure. Nobody discloses anything until they're in a place where they feel they're not going to hurt me anymore.
Completely
because it's safe spaces.
Safe space.
Yeah.
And also trying to shame the person into responding to anything makes you they automatically feel unsafe.
Yeah.
So you can't make the person accept counseling. You can't make if the person felt safe, they would do it.
Yeah.
If the person doesn't feel safe, trying to get them to do it just makes them feel more unsafe.
Then Fatih also raised the point. She said there are people who look at themselves and say, but I'm okay, I don't need counseling. That's why we're having today's episode. Impacts. And Sade has listed a lot of impacts, and I just want to run through basically 3 categories of impacts so everybody can look at themselves and say, am I as okay as I think I am? Let me start with myself. I grew up with asthma. Asthma, restrictive conditions of the lung in which you don't breathe very well when you're in certain environments. Clinically speaking, the triggers for asthma are in the environment. They are dust, animal hair, even stress levels. And those things are true. Those are external triggers, but they're also internal triggers, emotional triggers of asthma. What was interesting for me as a child who grew up with a certain level of at least emotional abuse, and I learned this when I will talk about the study later, the A study, is that when a child has been exposed to a threat at a formational age, like before you are 5, something that really terrified you, at the time when parts of your body are still forming or are still not yet fully formed, like your lungs in this case, the part of your body that responds to fear, anxiety, and all that is your central nervous system. And it reads the message of fear and goes into certain defensive modes to save your life. So on the one hand, if you're, I don't want to explain too much, but the way that human beings were formed in the primitive era, if a lion is coming to attack you, you're going to run away. So everything in your body is wired to make you ready to run. We're going to pump blood away from your internal parts to your physical muscles, your hands and your legs, so that your muscles will get strong and you will run. So if I started pumping blood away from my internal organs, like my lungs, when I was 3 or 2 or whatever, my lungs will not grow as much as other people's lungs. My lungs will restrict themselves. My lungs will be weaker. They will not experience the full extent of development that a normal person's lungs will. We overlook
Because
all
that
of that.
feeling, that adrenaline is only meant to be experienced like once in a while.
Yeah,
In
but
serious
you're
danger.
exposed to it at a young age.
Yes.
So it's and because that was the stage when your body was forming itself, what happens is that by the time you are 10, you have the lung of an 8-year-old, and your lungs are not as resilient as the lungs of other normal people. And then you have this thing called asthma. And all they tell you when you go to hospital is that, oh, just take that drug that will give asthma. And then stay away from dust. And that's totally good to do. But I think for someone like me, when you get more advanced in life, begin to deal with other non-medical causes of a broad spectrum of autoimmune disorders beyond asthma, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, have all been listed in the so-called ACE study. ACE means Adverse Childhood Experiences. And like I've said somewhere else before, the people who did that research have attached scores to children based on how many traumas they faced when they were growing up. And they can predict how those children will grow and which of them is going to grow up as an asthmatic, hypertensive, diabetic, and so on and so forth, just based on the fact that so this child has a score of 4/10, that one has a 6/10, that one has an 8/10, that one's going to have a cancer, that one's going to have a hypertension. And that's a long-term study and the results are out. Yeah. So those are the health consequences of trauma that is not resolved. The reason Sade and I are talking today is that whatever trauma we all have, there's work that we can do to begin to roll back the effects of that in our present day lives.
Yeah, it starts with awareness. I mean, just awareness, is the biggest thing. Like, oh, wow, there's some things I need to look at. When it says coming out of denial, because my parents divorced when I was very young, and there was domestic violence in my home. And honestly, until I became an adult, I was like, oh, none of that affected me. Oh, that was their problem. Until I read you read the AC study and you realize, oh, wait a second, maybe it did. Maybe there are impacts and things that I need to work on, even though it wasn't my fault and I didn't do it. There is an impact. There's not much you can do about the impact, except to reverse it and make sure that whatever those patterns are in your family stops with you, because then you become emotionally aware. You educate yourself about these things and you say, well, what went on when I was a kid that may be impacting me today, that may be impacting how I parent or how I'm living my life, and what can I change about it? It's literally it. It's like, in fact, even the shame, our culture is so shame-based that taking a look at ourselves is like something we don't want to do. Just saying, hey, maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just part of this human experience, and maybe I'm not meant to be perfect, even though my parents have been driving me to perfection since I was a kid. Maybe I'm okay, or maybe the thing that happened to me doesn't mean there's something wrong with me, or that I'm permanently damaged, or that I'm damaged at all. But because there's just so much shame, everything is about being shamed. Our words are so shameful. It's that's the air that we breathe. If we could even just break the pattern of shaming each other and shaming ourselves, that alone can change things for generations.
Sade, I put my notes away because I wanted to kind of, how do you call that? I wanted to come into a landing place with the things you are saying now. Let's just take this home, basically. And I think this what you said now would be the crux of the discussions we're having. A lot of these issues are cultural. And I say this without judgment. I say this without trying to imply that there's something wrong with us, for instance, as Nigerians. It's not about that. I think it's about stages. Well, look at, just like me now, I was once 16 and now I'm not 16 anymore. Everything in life is about growth. So even as a nation and as a cultural entity, we have to go through stages. And I think that the stage where we are right now as a nation, it's like a middle stage of growth. And one of the things we have to change is our ability to be in touch with our emotions. This thing you mentioned, shame. I didn't realize how significant shame plays a role, or how significant the role is of shame in my culture until I left Nigeria. And I began to live in other places where shame doesn't play any role. I've lived in places where if you tell someone, you're ugly, you're fat, I don't like you, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you don't like me, so life goes on. If you tell some of us that you're ugly, it's the end of their life.
It's the end of it.
Okay, so there's an element of socialization that, and like you said, it's in our words, in some of the things we say, the way we talk to each other, and we take it as a joke sometimes. Like, I look at you, your head is so big. Why is your head big like that? I look at you, your dress is not as fine as mine. There's some things, there's some local words we use. So we're going to have to, as a culture, deal with things like shame and then stigma. And all the stigma is wrongly placed. We put the blame on the victim instead of on the perpetrator. We're going to have to begin to deal with lack of empathy, the way we talk and the way we think. Oh my God, if you read some of the comments on some of these posts from people, you have to like, okay, make up your mind. What am I going to do with this? This person themselves, they need help for talking like the way they just talk now. Right. So I think that's something that we as a group, as a society, are going to need to begin to do. You know, it's easy, and I'm going to just leave this here. It's easy to focus on what's wrong with our society. What happened to the audio? On a macro level. Yeah, that was you. Fantastic. You're like a magician sometimes. So we focus on we both need new phones. Anyway, right. Let me not take. It's easy to focus on the macro things wrong with our society. Oh, we need new politicians. We need more education and health sector interventions. We need bridges to be built, and that's all very true. But I have a feeling that none of that development is sustainable until we heal ourselves as people and have the courage to talk about these things that you and I are saying, and not just me and Sade. We need our leaders, probably a different set of leaders, to become able to have these conversations and to know that there is something wrong with the way that our interpersonal relationships and the way we talk and think among one another are not useful for development. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. All right. Very nicely done, sir.
Yeah. Right. So maybe we're going to call it a day, a night, depending on where you are watching us tonight. We hope you enjoy this conversation and it's kind of triggered your thinking. If you want to talk more, Sade and I are available offline.
Or leave comments and questions below.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we can answer it there. Just keep the conversation going. Would be nice. We'll do this again. Well, probably Monday, but let's double check. Because we're still working out dates. I think Tuesdays and Fridays may actually work better for me.
Right. We need you guys to provide feedback for that, because we're trying to fix regular time so that you know what to expect. Is it Monday, Friday? Is it Tuesday, Friday? 2 times a week? Mm-hmm. Let us know what you think.
Right. And maybe we should talk about shame next week.
That's a huge topic.
It's a huge topic. But you know, but shame is one of those things where it's like, if you can get it as a starting point, it's like it can accelerate healing. Because most of what we're trying to avoid with everything we do is shame.
Yeah.
So
you know, one thing I would like to achieve for myself. I want to be able to talk about difficult things, including shame and all of that, without being angry at people, without being judgmental. I don't want to talk in a way and say, "Oh, but look at them, they're so bad, but me, I'm good." I don't want to have that mindset. I want to be able to talk about things without judging other people, and I want to talk about things without being angry at who offended me. Like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to show them. I'm going to hurt them because they hurt me. I think I can process things and say that they did something wrong to me without wanting to hurt them. All of these are stages
it's a level of growth. Yes.
Yeah, that's what
It's a level of growth. I'm there in some places. There's some areas where I'm like, I'm not there yet. But I'll tell you where I am. Like, you know, some places where I'm there. And I think the awareness is still the first thing. Like, if I'm not there yet, then I'm not there yet. And that's okay. You know? That's the thing. So, I totally hear you. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate the views and the likes and the comments. It's really nice to be in this conversation with you guys. So, Ayo, I'll see you next week.
Yeah, Sade, see you too on the other side of the live.
All right. Take care.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Yeah. Bye.